Spring 2023 was a pretty nuts anime season. There was a lot of new shows here to talk about, on top of all the sequels that came out. I think this season has the most shows that I've ever sat down after the season was over to get through. I had 10 shows that I had to watch after the season was done. And there may be plenty more that I should have watched and maybe will come back to over the years, but to have 10 shows immediately after the end of a season that I knew I have to go and watch, that's really never happened. You could say like last season in winter, there were 9, but I dropped 3 of them. And a couple of them were holdovers from fall to begin with. No, this was 10 that started this season that I had to watch, or at least I felt compelled to watch. And it was overwhelming because it usually doesn't take me as long as it did to get through a season's offerings after it's done. But so many of the shows ended up being really good, so I can't exactly complain. Now, notably, I did not drop anything from this season. There are maybe a couple shows that I, in hindsight, think I probably should have dropped, but we'll get to those later in the video. For now, let's start this seasonal roundup and discuss what exactly I watched from this season and if I liked it or not. Because I didn't drop anything, we're just going to start with the sequels. We'll start off with Golden Kamuy Season 4. Now, this isn't technically a spring show, right? This started in fall of 2022. And then got delayed after its 6th episode because somebody on the staff, who I don't think they've ever actually revealed the name of, died unexpectedly, and it just prevented them from getting the rest of the episodes out. But it started re-airing in the spring, and now we have all 13 episodes out. As far as the season is concerned, while I liked it about the same as the other seasons of Golden Kamuy, which I think are good, if strange, to say the least. If you've seen Golden Kamuy, you know it's a very unusual show, and it's not a show that's going to appeal to everyone because of its brand of humor and just kind of the strange things a lot of the characters will do, especially some one-off characters. But this did advance the story a little bit, perhaps not as much as the other seasons did. Like, I don't think as much changed by the end of this season as compared to the end of the other seasons, but still new characters were introduced, new things were explored, new plot points revealed, and we're trucking along. We're going to get to the 5th season, and apparently this is going to be the final season whenever that ends up coming out. So I am happy that Golden Kamuy will actually get a conclusion, because this is definitely a show that if it never got one, it would be hard to really sell people on. I think overall it needs to have that resolution to its story, and I'm happy we will eventually get to that. But the season was good. If you enjoyed Golden Kamuy so far, I think you'll enjoy this season as well. We had a couple spin-offs this season as well. The Konosuba spin-off, focusing specifically on Megumin and Yunyun, aired this season, and it was a show I was not exactly looking forward to. I felt very weird about it because I didn't really know if it would work all that well, having just one of the main characters around and really not including any of the others. I mean, very, very briefly, you kind of have them in the background, so to speak, but this is Megumin's show. I did not know if she could carry a show on her own, and I'd say yes, she does. Her and Yunyun, and I do like their dynamic. That being said, I don't think this is necessarily going to wow anybody, and as someone who likes Konosuba but is not in love with the show, this was just kind of fine. It was an okay thing to throw on once a week, but it wasn't exactly something I felt that attached to by the end of it. I also think it's maybe not jarring, but at least a little weird that the beginning of the show introduces a lot of new characters from the village Megumin and Yunyun come from, and then after like 4 episodes, they're just out of the show for the rest of the run. Like, I get it, like, because this had to cover story up until she meet the other characters from Konosuba. I get they had a lot to do in 12 episodes. They had a lot of time to cover, but it did feel weird that, you know, you introduced all of these characters and they seem to be relevant and then they're just gone. Like, I get why. It just felt weird as it was happening. So I don't know. I think this is fine. If you like Konosuba, certainly give this a watch. I do think that it handles itself better than I was expecting, but that doesn't mean that I think it's necessarily all that impressive at the end of the day. But it is what it is. It's fine, and I'm sure it will tide some people over well enough until season 3 of Konosuba comes out next year. Speaking of questionable side stories, we had the Ranking of Kings side story, the Treasure Chest of Courage, which I don't know why it's called the Treasure Chest of Courage, because every time an episode starts, it implies that the characters are going to go on this adventure to find the Treasure Chest of Courage, and then they never do. They literally never do that. Like, the only thing I can think of is there's something in episode 9 that's kind of like a treasure chest. Maybe that's what they meant, but they didn't go on an adventure to find it. It was just like a thing Boji had. So like, I don't know if that's what they meant by Treasure Chest of Courage, but either way, I feel gypped. Regardless, this is basically just 10 episodes of let's show things that happened in between episodes of the main show. And then the last episode actually takes place afterwards. And I think that most of these episodes are honestly incredibly boring. They don't offer a lot to really hold your attention. I really think the first few episodes are incredibly difficult to get through. The ones that stand out positively in my mind are the ones that have to do with the Underworld brothers, right? Desha, Despa, and Okin. I like those episodes that explore what happened to Okin in more detail, show more of their backstory, and then ultimately advance that story forward, primarily in the final episode, which I guess will set us up for the movie that's been announced rather than season 2, because I'm not even sure there's enough content for a second season. But there were some episodes here that I think are good, but the majority of the side story is just painful to sit through. And as someone who already had a lot of problems with where Ranking of Kings ended up going in its second half specifically, I struggle to really view this side story positively. Some aspects of it, yes, but most of it, I just could not care less about, and I do think that this was ultimately a very questionable thing to make. Tonikawa had its second season as well, and while I think this was fine, and I don't think it's bad or anything, I did find myself feeling it was a little less impressive than season 1, and from what I can tell, that's a pretty universal opinion regarding the season. I'm not entirely sure why. It's hard for me to point to one specific thing and say this is why it's a weaker season, but I don't know, it just came off as less charming. And this is a show that can be very charming when it wants to be, but at other times, it just kind of drops the ball. And something about this season, well, again, I don't think it was bad. I think it was fine. Something about it, I think, puts it just a little bit below season 1. Season 1, I think, left more of an impact than this season did. It's hard to explain, but it was a little bit unfortunate that I didn't feel as enamored with this as I did with season 1. Not that, I thought season 1 was the greatest thing ever made, but I thought it had its moments. And I think that season 2 just didn't really stand out enough, if that makes sense. Not bad, just not quite what I would have wanted. Demon Slayer had its third season, or fourth season if you count the TV adaptation of the movie, and I mean, it's more Demon Slayer. It's good, it looks good. I will say maybe it feels a little bit uneven in terms of which characters get focused, like the Hashira and the other new characters that are introduced, as well as Tanjiro. It is very enjoyable to see characters like Zenitsu take a backseat in this season after getting so much Zenitsu and him being so annoying. Inosuke to a lesser extent, but him as well. It's nice that they are not as present in this season, really much at all. And it's more Demon Slayer, it looks good, it's more nice battle animation scenes. Not a whole lot to say. At this point, I think you know if you like Demon Slayer or not. Gundam The Witch from Mercury second half was interesting, I would say. It definitely had its episodes that stood out. Ones that made you dislike certain characters, at least in the moment, and definitely left an impact once the credits were rolling. But at the same time, I almost feel like it wraps up things a little too cleanly, if that makes sense. Usually with a Gundam series, especially a TV Gundam series, I feel like they don't justify their episode length. The story does not properly fill out how many episodes it has, and that's usually because these shows end up with 50 episodes. This did not. This has 25, and I actually feel like maybe it could have used a couple more to further give the last couple episodes and the ultimate climax some breathing room. I don't dislike the ending. There are a few things where it's oh, really? Things worked out that easily. I don't have a problem with a happy ending in a Gundam series, and I think it's nice that things work out in the end. But, yeah, you could have elaborated on some of this stuff a little bit more. You could have spent more time on it. I also think this show does struggle a little bit, not as much as other Gundam, to be fair, but it does have some difficulty with keeping track of how many different organizations and groups are running around. And what it tends to do is one episode it'll mention this group, that has either never been mentioned before or has only been mentioned in like passing briefly many episodes ago, and they'll just expect you to know who they are, and then it won't be until like the episode after that they tell you, oh yeah, this is who this group is, this is why this group matters. To be fair, at least they're telling you. Like, some other Gundam series would not do that. They'd just be like, oh yeah, here's this group, care about them. I'm glad that they like do explain it. I just wish it was maybe handled a bit differently. That being said, I do think that Suletta does carry a lot of this season and this show, and I think she is a very ultimately likable character, especially by the end of her story, and you definitely feel for her with everything she has put through throughout this season. So overall, I liked Witch from Mercury. I do think it is definitely one of the better TV series Gundam outings. That doesn't mean it's without its flaws, but I am still ultimately happy with it. And I'm also just really happy it's not 50 episodes, because if this was 50 episodes, like, I think it could have used a few more episodes, definitely not 50. So I'm glad they had the restraint not to make it that long, because it would have been bloated and it would not have worked. So I do feel at least they are learning from the pitfalls of other Gundam series, which is a good thing. Now, as far as the two sequels I enjoyed the most, they were naturally the ones I was expecting to enjoy the most. Dr. Stone, Season 3, Part 1. I will say, it takes a few episodes for this season to really get going. We get a decent amount of time, and it makes sense because a lot of time is passing in universe, where the characters are just kind of getting ready to do the important stuff in this season. It can maybe feel a little bit draggy, but I get why it is the way it is. However, once the season really gets going, man, does it get going. A lot of big stuff happens, a lot of stuff that does keep you on the edge of your seat. And I'm really, really looking forward to the second half in the fall to fully resolve this new story arc. Or at least I hope fully resolve it. Certainly at least advance it further. There's a lot going on in this season in its second half of the half we have. So I guess it's middle quarter. But I am definitely looking forward to where it's going. A solid outing that hopefully will be matched and even surpassed by its second half later this year. Then we have the show that I was anticipating most eagerly when this season first came out, and that is the second season of the Ancient Magus Bride, which is also only the first half of its second season, which means we will be getting another half in the fall, which is good because this season, much like Dr. Stone's third season, does not resolve everything. There's a lot still that needs to be fleshed out among the characters and among the main mystery going on. But I just adored getting to see these characters again. I think that it does help expand the world well, and I like that it still kept Elias in the loop, which is something that I was afraid of, that the change in setting to the college would maybe keep Elias out of Chisei's life, and thankfully they find a way around that. Unfortunately, a lot of the secondary characters from the first season really don't get much to do here. Some of them just don't show up, some of them show up once and that's it. It's understandable. And this season did have a lot, and I mean a lot, of new characters to introduce, and maybe even too many, because out of all the characters who are in like Chisei's class, very few of them are actually like relevant characters. Some of them are, but a lot of them are like just kind of there and that's it. And maybe that's their purpose, or maybe they'll get more focus as time goes on. It seems that people have not been as impressed with this season as the first season, and I can understand that just because this is only the first half of a season and a lot of stuff needs to be resolved. Like, if this was all that we were getting for season 2, I would probably be a little bit disappointed as well, but because we're getting more, I'm not going to be as harsh on this because, well, we're getting more. I can't say, oh, how dare it not resolve this plot point, how dare it not give more to this character when we still have another entire half of the season to go. So I am eagerly awaiting the next part of this in the fall. I really enjoyed watching this every week, even though, yes, could it have maybe had fewer characters or given more time to some of these new characters? Sure. I still think it works out, and I think it mostly gave me what I wanted to see from this season before it started. Also, the ending theme, amazing. Probably my favorite song of the season. I love it. Really, really adore it. Fantastic song. And it was something I look forward to hearing every week. So with those out of the way, let's talk about the many, many new shows that I watched this season as well. We'll start off with a couple that I wasn't so enamored with, to put it lightly. My Love Story with Yamada-kun at level 900 more billion. This show was, it was fine. I don't know how else to put it. It was just okay. I think it suffers primarily from just not having very interesting characters. Primarily Yamada himself, and that's, I guess, sort of just how the character is, and it can be understandable why he's written so plainly, but it doesn't fix that he's just not that entertaining to watch. And even Akane really doesn't help with that. So when your two romantic leads aren't very appealing and are just kind of there, you don't have much of a show. And while the supporting characters are, again, fine, they're nothing to write home about either. There just isn't a lot here, for me at least. I know some people really got into this, and I'm sure if you have more of an interest in MMO gaming, I get it. Although I would say the show really doesn't spend that much time focusing on it, certainly not as much as other shows have. So I don't know. This just didn't do it for me. It's a show that I did consider dropping when I was first starting it. I ended up sticking with it. Maybe I should have dropped it. I don't know. Like, it's not a bad show. It's just okay. And when there are so many romance anime that we are going to talk about that came out this season, this is one of the weakest ones that I happen to experience. So it would not be high up on a list of recommendations for me, certainly. But a show that I liked even less than Yamada-kun is My Clueless First Friend. And I really didn't expect to dislike this show as much as I did, because it sounds like a really cute premise, right? This girl who just has been bullied for looking gloomy. Everyone just calls her the Grim Reaper. And yet this new kid comes, thinks that's really cool, and becomes her friend. And it goes from there. And slowly she makes more friends, and her life gets better, and fewer people tease her. That sounds like a cute enough story, right? But it is just so difficult to sit through. At least it was for me. Again, I did not drop this show, but I probably should have, because Tayo, the main male character, is kind of insufferable, and let me explain why. He is bright like the sun, so a very fitting name, constantly with very few exceptions, happy, excited, energetic, and completely enamored with Nishimura, the main female lead. To the point where, like, you really cannot take what he's saying seriously, because these are supposed to be like 10-year-old kids. And no 10-year-old is going to be saying things like this, even if he is clueless. It's so difficult to watch him say things in such a straightforward way that adults would not be able to do. If you've seen the show, you know what I mean. The way that he constantly says Nishimura is amazing and fantastic and says all these amazing things about her and misinterprets things that other characters say that are meant to be putting her down as roundabout compliments. I mean, it can be entertaining at times to see him take what bullies are saying and transfigure it so that they just get confused and get tired of it. I can understand the appeal of that, but A, I feel like it gets old, and B, it's just so difficult to sit there and think, oh yeah, this could happen. This one character who is supposed to brighten the life up of our main female lead just kind of made the show borderline unwatchable for me. And like, I'm sure not everyone's going to feel that way. There are going to be people who don't mind Tayo, who even appreciate him and like the comedy that comes from how he reacts to things, how clueless he is, and appreciate how much his presence changes Nishimura's life and makes her life more positive, allows her to get friends, and sets up a romance between her and Tayo in the future. I'm sure this will appeal to plenty of people, but for me, Tayo was just too much. I could not take what he was saying seriously, and it got old very quickly. Again, I probably should have dropped this show, but I didn't, so here we are. On a more positive note, let's talk about Kubo Won't Let Me Be Invisible. Now, this is a pretty simple show, and in fact, it is a winter show that got delayed about halfway through, but it finished this season, so we're going to talk about it here. I thought this show was enjoyable. It's not the most amazing thing out there, but I thought it was entertaining. I liked the dynamic between the main two leads. I do think that if this got more seasons, it might get old, just because there isn't enough progression between the two characters. There is progression, don't get me wrong, but from what I understand from the source material, it kind of just keeps going along like this until the very end where there is a resolution to things. So I'd probably be fine with just this and not any more. And I don't think this is going to knock anyone's socks off, but it's cute. It's enjoyable. Kubo's a fun character. It's nice to see these two get to know each other, grow closer, even if it doesn't go as far as I think many people would want it to. It's not bad. Give it a watch if it sounds interesting. Certainly, I think it is a better example of a show that has a character who teases somebody than other shows like that, like Takagi-san, which I could not stand. I think this teasing is much more lighthearted, much cuter, and doesn't come off as bullying. That's a plus in this show's favor. Mashle, Magic and Muscles, was a show I didn't really know if I wanted to watch, but I figured I'd try it out anyway. And you know what? It's not bad. It is sort of just this silly action comedy show where the main guy is the one person who doesn't have magic in this society, but because he has such ridiculous muscle strength, he can basically do magical things and make people think he can do magic because he's just so ridiculously strong. And I thought it was entertaining, more entertaining than I expected. I will say the main plot, quote unquote, that kicks in around the second half of the season really isn't that interesting. It's just kind of like, oh, we got some people we gotta fight, and then they fight them, and then there's a potential threat looming in the distance because there's a second half coming in winter, and it'll continue on from this. But I don't know, it just wasn't that entertaining when it tried to have any semblance of like an actual story going on. It was more interesting when it was just, let's put this guy in weird situations where he has to pass off that he can do magic when he can't. I don't think it will appeal to everyone, but you know what? It's okay. It's not a bad thing to throw on, and I do think it was sufficiently entertaining during its first half, and I hope that in its upcoming second half in winter, it'll return to being just kind of entertaining. Nothing too ridiculous as far as trying to engage your mind so much as just, hey, let's watch some funny action hijinks in this anime Hogwarts school with this guy who basically is doing magic even though it's not magic. Skip and Loafer was a show that I expected to be very similar to Kimi ni Todoke, and yeah, it kind of is, though I do think that perhaps simply by nature of not doing what Kimi ni Todoke did in its second season, it is better than Kimi ni Todoke, but it has a lot of similar color and lighthearted vibes to it. This is just a very feel-good show with this character moving to the city, making friends, sort of having this romance that probably will develop in the future, but it is taken a bit slowly. I don't mind that though, because even though you would look at this and say, oh yes, this is predominantly a romance series, it's honestly more just about building this friend group. And I kind of like that. Obviously, like, yeah, the romance is there, and I assume if this gets another season, which we don't know if it will, that will eventually get more focus, but I kind of like this just, hey, let's have this character get friends and live a happy life. It's just very fun. It's very charming. It's the kind of show that will put a smile on your face. I think it is definitely worth checking out. If you go in expecting a fulfilling, satisfying romance, you know, you're probably not going to get that, maybe in future seasons. But as a show that's just very, very charming, very colorful, very bright, very happy, I think you will appreciate this. I certainly did. Heavenly Delusion gave us an example of a show that takes place in a post-apocalyptic setting while still trying to sort of find meaning in life and the beauty in the world despite everything that's gone wrong. Traveling around, seeing how different people are coping with the situation, encountering the new threats brought on by the apocalypse, and slowly trying to piece together what exactly has happened, at least from the audience's perspective. Now, I think this is a really potentially great show. However, it very much so needs more seasons in order to become that. What we have right now is really good, and I enjoyed it, and I like the characters. I'd like to see more of the world, but just with the 13 episodes we have now, it's hard. It's hard to say this is on its own fantastic. It's good, but we need to see more. We need to see these plot threads carried out to their conclusion. Right now, a lot of stuff has been set up. A lot of things have been introduced. There's a lot of mystery going on, but the main journey of our two leads is not completed, and all of the side story stuff going on with the hidden away school has not been fully explored. There's a lot that needs to be carried forward to really make me say I am satisfied with this. We aren't at a stopping point in the story where I feel that way. And that is in no way a problem with the show, right? It's not like it needed to have everything resolved after 13 episodes. Of course not. We just need to get more seasons. And unfortunately, we don't have a second season confirmed for this yet. I'd like to think we will get one. and I hope we will. And if we eventually get a conclusion to this, then that fixes the main problem I have here. But just fair warning, this does definitely need more content to fully feel like a satisfying ride. If you're someone who does not like stories that are incomplete, you're probably going to want to wait on this one. Hell's Paradise, on the other hand, does have a second season already confirmed, and it's a good thing it does, because much like Heavenly Delusion, if we didn't have a second season already, it would put the show in this kind of precarious situation where not enough is resolved. But now that we know we're getting more, we can probably say, yeah, Hell's Paradise is a good show. It's relatively darker compared to a lot of other shonen, and it's well animated because, of course, it's MAPPA. It's going to be well animated. Maybe it's not on the same level as something like Jujutsu Kaisen, but does it really need to be in terms of its fight quality? It looks good, and it's enjoyable enough. That being said, is it perfect? No, of course not. It does, I think, struggle from having just too many characters running around, and yes, this is a show where it's sort of like a battle royale and a lot of people die, so it's not like you're stuck with all of those characters, right? The 10 criminals and the 10 people watching them and all of the villains, and it does thin the numbers somewhat well, but at the same time, do I feel like a lot of characters just don't get that much to do? Yeah, I do. Granted, we have future seasons, and as the cast gets smaller and smaller, you would expect the ones that survive to get more and more, but yeah, did we really need this many characters, especially when so many of them were just going to get killed off immediately? Like in the second episode, we have them bring all of these criminals just for them to say, okay, we only want some of you, so start killing each other. It's like, did you need to do this? I guess just for the sake of showing a bunch of people fighting and killing each other in a brutal way, sure, but it seems kind of inefficient, doesn't it? Regardless, it's a fun enough show, and I'm curious to see where things go as we learn more about this weird island everyone has stumbled across. Oshi no Ko is a show that has a very weird description when you first read it, and I thought myself the description sounded really weird. It's the kind of show that if it did not have such a strong fan base and if it didn't have so much hype going into it before it came out, I probably would not have had my eye on it because it just sounds really strange. This doctor who is treating this famous idol who is pregnant, and he ends up getting killed and reincarnated as one of her children, right? It sounds very strange. And yeah, I mean, Oshi no Ko is kind of a strange show, but it does a lot, and I mean a lot, with that initial premise. And I don't think it's terribly surprising to see why this show became so big, to the point where I think it was number one on Mal's list for a while, although granted, a lot of shows do that while they're airing. And I do think a big part of that was because of its very, very smart decision to do a basically movie-length first episode, an hour and 20 minutes. So the equivalent of 4 episodes in one, which got a lot of the prologue stuff out of the way and set up what the show really wanted to focus on. I think that was very, very smart. Didn't really seem like anyone was expecting them to do that. It caught a lot of people off guard. And it's a very impressive first episode because it's able to do so much. But once the show is established, it, as I said, tries to do a lot. We have this focus on idols and trying to create a new idol group. But on top of that, you have the main character, Aqua, trying to advance his acting career. And he's only really doing that because he wants to learn information about the murder mystery he's trying to solve. And on top of that, you have all the interpersonal relationships, how they're expanding and growing and being set up. There's a lot here. And just generally learning more about the entertainment industry in Japan and kind of just how terrible it is. Oshi no Ko really is another one of these shows that needs future seasons to put what we have currently into perspective. I think it's good. I enjoyed it. I liked the characters. I liked seeing all these things set up, but we need to see where these seeds ultimately grow, what they become. And thankfully, like Hell's Paradise, we have a second season already confirmed, which I am looking forward to. If you haven't seen this show because of the weirdness of its premise, I do recommend that you give it a shot. It is definitely more than meets the eye. And if you're able to overcome just the inherent weirdness when you read the synopsis, I think you'll be very pleasantly surprised. Speaking of surprises, one show that I don't think anybody, and I mean anybody, really expected to be worthwhile was The Dangers in My Heart. A show that I don't really think anybody talked about much at all while it was first airing, and certainly not before it came out. Because if you read the synopsis, you thought, wow, this sounds dumb. The idea of this middle school kid who fantasizes about murdering his classmates in like weird, silly ways, and then he meets this really hot girl who kind of annoys him potentially, and then he thinks about trying to murder her in weird ways. Like, it just sounds like a weird show, and why would you really want to watch it? And ultimately, it seemed like something that would just kind of be trying to find weird comedy out of this scenario that would kind of just be really uncomfortable. But turns out it's almost sort of a bait and switch, because they basically drop the whole murder idea pretty early on for the most part, and it just becomes a general romance show. And as a romance show, it is fantastic. It is very well handled. The two main characters get a lot of focus, development. Their relationship is one of the most well-justified relationships I have seen in a long time in anime romance. So often, it's easy to screw this up. To have the two characters get together too quickly, or fall in love too quickly, or to drag it out way too long. It's hard to meet that sweet spot. And while their romantic progression is not done by the end of this season, it is really enjoyable to watch, and it feels really genuine to see these characters meet each other, not really understand each other at first, become friends, and then genuinely and naturally develop feelings for each other. It is really sweet and wholesome. And when you read that synopsis, you would not think that this show would be wholesome, but it is. It doesn't feel weird that either of these characters has feelings for each other. It feels logical. It feels like it makes sense. There is something really charming about this show, and it really, really blew me away, because I didn't really know what to expect from it. And I don't really think anybody did, because this was a show that went from basically nobody talking about it to being one of the most well-regarded shows of the season. Like, if there was anything you could consider a dark horse from spring, it was this. And out of all the romance shows that have come out this season, this is easily one of the strongest, and just in general, one of the best shows from spring 2023. If you did not watch this because of the synopsis, and I do not blame you, I do not blame anybody for not watching this because of the synopsis. I didn't have it on my radar at all because of the synopsis. Try this out. If you enjoy romance anime, you owe it to yourself. I don't think you'll regret it. The last show we'll talk about is another romance show that I also think is just really, really fantastic, and that is Insomniacs After School. Now, this is a show I did have on my radar. I think a lot of people did. It had a decent amount of hype building towards it before it came out. But it's a show that I think also does some stuff that's different from what people would have expected. I think a lot of people, myself included, kind of expected Call of the Night, but instead of being in a city, being in a less, like, urban area. And for, like, one episode, that's what they do, and then the two characters almost get caught by the cops for running around at night, and they never do it again. This show is so much more than I think you would initially guess from its premise, partly because of just how endearing and likable our two leads are, how, again, justified and natural their romance is. Though, of course, in case of Dangers in My Heart, it has a second season already confirmed for winter. This one, unfortunately, does not. But regardless of that, this show is able to take a well-paced romance, likable characters, and a genuine trauma that both of them are trying to overcome with each other's help, and mix it all up somehow with a really atmospheric and breathtaking set of visuals and scenes and backgrounds that just makes it such a joy to watch. Now, a lot does change throughout the show. The two characters end up spending time in an observatory at the school that doesn't get used anymore, but then they're forced to start using it. And at first you'd think it would be sort of just an episodic. They find ways to make the observatory look better and try to deal with their insomnia and sleep there and maybe go out at night, sort of like Call of the Night. But then it becomes so much more, because they actually have to do stuff to justify staying in this observatory. They have to form a club. They have to do club activities, put on events. They have to try and get the reputation of their club boosted by entering into contests. And that becomes really the main thrust of the show in the second half, this idea of going around and actually just taking breathtaking photos of nighttime scenery to try and boost the club's reputation. And because of that, the show goes in a direction I don't think many people expected, but it works so well. It keeps things fresh and keeps things moving while never feeling like it ever goes somewhere you wouldn't think is natural. And all the while, we learn more about these two characters, why they're insomniacs, why they struggle, and it really is, I think, deceptively relatable. Because not everybody has insomnia. Not everybody can just not sleep at night. That being said, I don't think it's that hard to sympathize with people who fear what will happen in the future, who fear just how things may go just tomorrow, one day from now, who are afraid that things will be worse. So why ever go to sleep and let tomorrow come? because if you stay awake all night, you never change days, now do you? It's the sort of thing that I think everyone can connect with, at least to some extent. That fear of the unknown, that fear of things going wrong tomorrow, things completely out of your control, just destroying everything. And these characters have had to deal with that, have had genuine reasons to be terrified of the next day. And by getting to know each other, spending time with each other, falling in love with each other, they're able to fall asleep because they start to have things to look forward to in the future, things that make tomorrow a lot less scary. And I think that is something basically anyone can relate to. So as a result, I'm actually struggling to pick what my favorite show of the season was. I think I'd have 4 very strong contenders. The Dangers in My Heart for being a really, really well done romance. Insomniacs After School for also being a well done romance, but also being really aesthetically fun to watch and soothing and having a lot of relatability that I did not expect. But also, yeah, I mean, Dr. Stone season 3, really good and got very intense in its second half. And then The Ancient Magus Bride. So any one of those 4 probably could be anime of the season for me, and I don't really think I can pick one over the other. Overall, this season was just insane and fantastic. So many good shows came out this season. So many great shows came out this season. We had a wide variety of romance anime, most of which were worth watching. But we also had some battle anime, some action anime, some post-apocalyptic anime, some more soothing anime. We had a lot here, and a lot of it was really, really well done. I am very pleasantly surprised by how good this season was. It was kind of overwhelming because as somebody who typically waits until the end of the season to watch the non-sequels, having like 10 shows to watch all at once was a lot. And it ended up taking me like a month and a half to watch everything from June 12th to like a day ago, August 2nd, to actually finish those 10 shows. It was a lot, but I think it was worth it. This was a really, really fantastic season, and you owe it to yourself to check out some of these shows. Not all of them. I still think I probably should have dropped a couple of these, but so much of this season was great. And the fact that a lot of these shows are getting new seasons, right? Mashle, Dangers in My Heart, Hell's Paradise, Oshi no Ko. We have guaranteed second seasons for these shows. It means even if they did not accomplish enough in their existing seasons, they're getting more to eventually continue the story. There are some shows that I wish would get more seasons, like Heavenly Delusion, like Insomniacs, but we'll just have to wait and hope. That being said, let me know what your thoughts are on this season. What shows did you enjoy? What shows were you disappointed with? Did you watch everything I talked about? Were there shows that I missed? Despite all the shows that I watched, were there more that I should have watched? Were the ones that I missed out on? Were the ones that you missed out on? Was this season as insane for you as it was for me? Let me know in the comments down below. I'm interested to see your thoughts because this really was a rare season to get with so many things to watch, especially non-sequels, that I think there's a lot to discuss here. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed. And of course, take care everyone. Look forward to the next video.